presentation toward a self-aware city.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Simone. So Simone asked me to talk about what a smart city could be using a few examples. So I wanted to take a step back for a second and ask, why are cities interesting? This might be stuff that a lot of you are familiar with, but think of cities. They've long been places of attraction, right? They've drawn people to them for millennia. In fact, they were so successful that today it's where most people live, right? And the growth is so fast that it's predicted that by 2050, we'll have almost 2/3 of the planet living in cities. Now, if you look at population growth, it means that the same number of people we have today on the entire planet will be packed into cities by then. So it's significant. Now, there are many numbers that make cities interesting to look at. I'll just give a few, there are many others. They cover 2% of the Earth's inhabitable crust, okay, so very little land area. Cities, or the infrastructures of cities, consume about 2/3 of the energy globally, and in turn, emit about 75% of CO2 or CO2 equivalent emissions. Cities also produce 80% of the world's GDP. So one way to think about it is that the challenges and opportunities of the planet have coincided now with those of cities. And if you want to do something about the planet, you may as well tackle it in cities because they're so concentrated, so you can be really effective on a planetary scale. Now, we all know what's happening also in parallel. We're going through a technological transformation. I figured I shouldn't go through examples of what smartphones are here in this room, but sensors are embedding themselves in everything. Robotics are becoming part of everyday object. With interconnectivity, people can talk to things, that can talk back to people, that can talk to infrastructure, and we have this sort of digital layer weaving itself into the environment around us. Now, it gives an opportunity to address some of the key challenges, key problems of cities in totally new ways. Some people call this smart cities. There are other names for this new discipline, but what really is a smart city? Right? It could be so many things. I'd like to sort of ask a few questions by giving some examples and look at the different categories of what a smart city could be. So, first one is observation and learning. Right? The vast flows of data that go through our cities, and increasingly so, make it so that we can observe, also in real time, things we couldn't see before. Here's an example of a project that was done at the Sensible City Lab, where the question was, how can we tell what's in our collective gut, right? By looking at sewers, okay? This is a project about public health. There is an estimated 100 trillion microorganisms in our intestines, what's called the microbiome. It's about 1 to 10 times the number of cells we have in our body. And recent findings show that you can tell a lot about a person's health by analyzing their microbiome. Now, can you do it for communities? An interesting question, right? So we developed a little robot that goes into manholes and takes samples from the sewer. And then this does some pre-processing on it. Later, it's amplified via PCR to start to analyze the microbiome. Actually started through an experiment with a few miserable grad students that had to go down and collect samples from manholes. And later was done in an automated way. And the initial findings show that you're able to detect signal that both has a temporal aspect to it, right, because the sewer has flow, a spatial aspect to it because the sewer serves a particular area, and really start to ask questions about what's the impact of a certain type of place on people's public health, access to transportation, certain diets, socioeconomic status, etc. What happens when you open that data up to people? Right? Another thing that makes a city sort of smarter, if you want, is the ability to take these observations and learnings and feed them into new solutions to try to address some problems. Here's an example from the world of transportation. With the growth in urbanization, the growth in middle class, the growth in population around the world, it's predicted that by 2050 you'll have 2.5 times to 3 times more demand for urban transportation. And we're in California. In many places, it's already dysfunctional today. And now think of Lagos, think of Mexico City, think of the DC area. 2.5 times that, it's a non-starter, right? So people have realized this, and around the world have been looking for new modes of transportation, something that could complement the car ride. This is an example from the US, where the age of people getting a driver's license is getting later and later, or if you want, fewer people have driver's license today, and look how many less than in 1983 have it today, say for the age group of 18. It's between 83%, it's a drop to 58% today. But what could be the other mode? One example is bikes, right? So bicycles are great. The problem is that our cities have grown so big since the introduction of the car and underground rail that it's hard to traverse them without motorized transport. So what we thought was, let's introduce a robot, something that can go on almost any bicycle, and completely augment our body, expand our reach so we could traverse those large environments. Initially, it was developed at MIT at the Sensible City Lab in partnership with the mayor of Copenhagen, and now it's brought to market by a company called Superpedestrian that I lead that manufactures it and sells it. The thing has a motor inside, a set of batteries, about 12 different sensors, and an embedded control system, all that packed into this red hub, connected wirelessly to the phone and to the cloud. As you ride, this thing, using the sensor, identifies the most minute things you do with your legs and imitates you. The sensation is like you're doing all the work, but in fact, you're 10 times stronger. So it's quite a kind of a weird experience, like taking an athlete's dope. Now, when you pedal, you can also control this with your phone. You can also collect information from the environment, transmit it up to the cloud, share it with other cyclists. And if you're a developer, you can write apps for this, for the whole system of cycling, like you do for smartphones today, for the purpose of better transportation. It's just one example. There are going to be many other types of small single and double occupancy vehicles that we'll be seeing entering our cities to complement the automobile. Now, the last thing I want to briefly touch on is maybe a step back to ask, well, what's special about good cities? If you go back to Roman era, when the Romans built a new city, all they did pretty much was lay out the main arteries, parcel the land, put a few pieces of critical infrastructure, and let the people do the rest. Now, fast forward to the early previous century with modernism. The idea was that the designer could call to the last detail what people should live in, right? Dictate almost human life through design. And we know it failed with examples like Brasilia, and there are many others. We've learned from modernism and went back in the 60s and 70s to try to create a more bottom-up kind of way of making cities. Now, digital technologies are fundamentally different from those of the industrial era. Like the internet, this is an image of the global IP backbone, right? Like the internet, this sort of cyber-physical city can call for a lot broader-based engagement. Think of citizens, think of mayors, entrepreneurs, social organizations. They will be able to participate in a much greater extent in the making of place using a digital infrastructure. Thank you very much.